Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Highly Unlikely with Josh and Jenaye, and we're so glad that you're here, and hopefully these conversations have been helpful to you every other week now. We've been dropping episodes and lots of different topics and a variety of different things that we've talked about. More variety today, so excited for this conversation, and we're going to start with...
You want to know, we've been saying for multiple episodes that on the front end, we're going to say, instead of the back end of the episode,
we're going to say,
hey, if you love the podcast,
now is the time.
Now's the time. Click subscribe. Rating it helps it somehow.
Yes.
I'm looking to the people who tell us that it helps it. So
we're not going to be those people that are like, and if you could leave a 5-star review, that would be helpful. But it does help it get traction.
Yeah.
And people to see it.
If you feel so inclined, please do that. And we thank you in advance.
Yeah.
So
our biggest goal, honestly, is just to galvanize and strengthen our church and have conversations that we're not always able to have in person.
Yeah.
And so I love hearing the stories from people who are like, I had a friend come up and he goes, well, Josh, I listen to your voice now every morning, when in my bedroom while I'm getting ready because my wife has the podcast on,
I think I know what you're talking about. That's funny.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We were just at a gathering on Friday and I was talking to someone that they said, oh, I just feel like I've been in touch with you because I listened to the podcast. And I said, that's so great because that was kind of the whole goal. And she said, I didn't know there were so many awesome people and stories from within our church. And we're going to highlight another one today. Yeah. But I was like, yeah, I know. I think that's something we've realized too is like, wow, we love being able to bring people in from our church home and highlight their highly unlikely life and what God's called them to do. That's so cool. So, yeah.
Yeah, so we're excited that our friend Noah is here today. And
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to hear. There's a lot of different things we want to get to in your story, but even this past summer, the incredible experience that we had together, the crazy experience. Mine was easier than yours, but...
Have you heard that there's someone I believe that looks kind of like a twin to you in our church? Have you told them this? And I get you. I mean, I'll show you a picture when we're done.
Okay.
And I'm convinced you guys look like twins.
Yeah.
Because when people...
You don't have a twin in the church.
I thought this person served on production.
Yeah.
And it was you, right? You serve on production?
I serve on production.
It was you, not the person.
Was the
it
person
was you, but
on?
I thought, no, that person doesn't serve at all with production. But when I saw you, I thought it was that person. So, fun fact,
I want to know.
I will tell you at the end. I'm not going to say their name, but I will tell you, and I can even show you. So funny. Maybe you know the person. But.
So go ahead in the comments if you think that Noah has a twin. Just drop
Where's the camera?
Pose if you could.
Yeah. Okay. It was my job to pull the question today.
Sure.
And
you got a lot of questions.
I pulled 4 because, we're to the phase where we keep pulling the same ones, but one that we're not going to answer, but I think it's really funny.
We always start with a question from the bowl. If you're new to the podcast, a question from the bowl.
And now it's questions, and we choose which one we like better. But one of them says, do you listen to any podcasts? Which is your favorite? So,
I can answer that.
Want to do it?
Yeah.
And I have some backup ones if we don't really love that entirely. But yeah.
I have 2 favorite podcasts that I'll mention. One is America History Tellers, which goes through, I know everybody in the room is like, cool.
How suspenseful.
But I love American history, and they go through like real stories. Like, did you know that there was a plot to steal Lincoln's body from his grave and to use it to leverage the government to, I think it was to let a guy out of jail in this big scheme around counterfeit money. So who knew? So super interesting to me, so I like that. But then I also have 2 tennis podcasts. One is called Nothing Major, and it's 4 American tennis players who never won a major title, and they started a podcast called Nothing Major, and it's pretty good, pretty clean. So I really enjoy it.
For all you tennis lovers out there in the Midwest.
Listen, me and Avery can listen to it together, and at least if they swear, they bleep it out. So
right. And
it's tennis news, which what else could you want to
listen to? Josh really cares about that. We went to, friends bought us tickets to the Dallas Open because Josh was speaking somewhere down in Dallas when it was there. And I went with him, and I was sitting there, and I think tennis is one of the most boring sports. And Josh knows that. Because you don't
understand it.
Right. And I don't know if Josh was happy I was there or very annoyed because I kept being like, wait, what just happened? Wait, what was that? So I did learn how they keep score in tennis, which is the most complicated scoring system I've ever seen in my life. But
Well, there was a phase in my life where I was really to tennis.
All right.
Really?
Come on.
Yeah. Well, it was when they had the Rafael Nadal. And,
Yeah.
What's the guy's name? Tell me, because you know.
Federer?
Yes. So they had the Rafael Nadal Federer like rivalry, right? And it was a French Open, and you had to have been. So I'm 40, you're 38. So this.
I'm 39. I'm catching you.
So we're close. So like, but it was the French Open, and they went. I mean, they went back and forth.
Yeah.
This had to have been 15 years ago, or maybe even longer.
Wow.
Right, but like, or maybe I can't remember. But it was at the height of the rivalry. But ever since like that time period, I watched previous to that and post that.
Yeah.
Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer.
He's my guy.
Were just like legit.
Yep.
So there's a phase where I mean, I can really. And then they had, I mean, I can't remember all. Djokovic was coming up.
He's
and
still
then
playing.
The American guy. Who's the American guy? He doesn't play anymore. Huh?
Roddick.
Yeah, Roddick.
He has
Roddick
a
was there.
podcast too,
So like,
but he has a podcast, but he's a potty mouth, so you get to
stay away. But yeah, so there was a phase where, I mean, it was that phase of my, it was, I was totally into it. I had to learn the scoring system.
Right.
Yeah, I love
It's
that.
such an interesting sport.
Nadal did retire this year, so we're gonna hold here's a moment of silence.
Oh, okay.
You didn't do it.
No,
Come
I'm
on.
not. No way. But I looked at Josh during that tennis match and I said, I am sitting here because I love you and you love this sport. And I don't know how many times through it, I was watching this show at the time that I was this little romantic comedy show. And Josh was like, if you want to put in your AirPods and just watch your show, you can go right ahead. And I was like, it's okay. I'm doing fine. I did do some online shopping,
But in my defense, I also sat on a very hard chair at Dillard's while you tried those
I did.
overalls
You're
on.
so right.
So it's a give and take.
It was give and take. You went shopping. I went to a tennis match. Okay.
All right, are you guys going to answer the question?
My favorite is It's called Intentional Parents Podcast. I think one of the best.
It is probably the best parenting podcast.
Not even just, and they don't even just touch on parenting, but it's actual family members, like a mom-dad duo with their daughter and son-in-law. And that one, I'm not like faithful in listening to a bunch of them, but I'll sporadically listen to like, Hey, It's the Lesko's, Lisa Turkhurst's Therapy and Theology is very interesting. What are other ones I listen to? Primarily Intentional Parent Podcasts, big one. But yeah.
Yeah. Are you a podcaster?
I'm not, but I do listen to, you could call it a podcast, maybe. There's an app for it. But it's wisdom for the heart. And it's a pastor out of North Carolina. His name is Stephen Davey.
Okay.
And I had a rental car, backstory on it real quick. I had a rental car 6 years ago, because our minivan got ran into by some elderly gentleman trying to turn into some Denny's parking lot down by the mall.
Get out of the way.
Yeah, it got me. And so we had a rental car while I was in the body shop, and I turned it on one morning on my way to work. I guess it would be the first morning, and on the radio was this guy named Stephen Davey. And I listened to his sermon, and it just kind of hit me in the moment.
Yeah.
Kind of a right time, right place type thing. And I was like, who is this guy and how do I find him? But he has a app, Wisdom for the Heart app. And then all his sermons are on there from all the way back to like 89.
Wow.
So cool.
Yeah. So that would be the one and only. I fall asleep usually at night. I'll put earbuds in and just listen to a sermon from Stephen Davey or
I
Josh.
love that. Stop it. That's all right. I have pastors
Fun fact,
that I love
Davey,
to
though,
listen.
he's
Josh
legit.
absolutely hates re-listening to himself. Like if I miss something, or sometimes I re-listen to these if it was like a really long time. Like the counseling one that just came out. I was like, what did we talk about on that again?
Yeah.
And I'll be like, oh my gosh, shut that off.
Is it the sound of your voice or is it?
I think, well, sometimes on the podcast, I listen back and I think I'm not a great listener. Like I disconnect thoughts in the conversation because I have something brewing in my mind. So that irritates me about myself.
You analyze it.
Yeah. But I think I've gotten better about listening to myself.
Yeah, you have.
But yeah, you honestly have to be willing to like see your own mistakes and realize, because even when I listen to myself back, I will hear myself say words wrong, or you like hear the mistakes or say
I'm saying that for me, not for you.
Yeah. And it's just, it's not the most comfortable. I think most people don't love the sound of their own voice. You know,
I agree.
If they have to
Or
listen to
don't
it.
love watching yourself on like video or something like that.
Because we all definitely present differently, really, than we think in our minds. You know?
So true.
So, yeah. Anyways.
What a fun little intro.
Yeah. It's good. So I love podcasts. So I have about 20 that I shuffle through. So I could do a whole
And he listens
podcast
to it
about
on like
podcasts.
7x speed. So
Perfect.
it's like,
Okay. I listen on 1.5. If I was listening to Dr. Alicia Britt Sholey, I would listen to it on 2.5. That's just how I am.
we need to have her on the podcast.
She's great.
She is great.
Yeah, not because the content isn't good, but because of her cadence.
She does not run in life. She probably lives life at the pace of Jesus.
Yes, it's very
More than
true.
likely.
Just thinking about her makes me slow down my cadence. So
Okay.
Noah, you've been around Evangel for a while.
2008.
Yeah. And how did you guys end up at the church?
Sure. So I was going to college in Minot, and I met my wife in Minot, freshman year in college. And so we started to date that year, but fast forward, she did a internship. She's a speech pathologist. So she did internship or, I'll just call it an internship with Bismarck Public Schools. And so she then applied shortly after and accepted a position. And so we both then moved down here, got married, and my parents are down here and my sisters are down here. They moved after, but we moved down here after college and that sort of thing, like 2008. And my parents had already started attending this church. And so we kind of came and got on the Doug Graham.
Doug Graham.
We've been talking about him a lot the last couple
He
days.
came up in a different conversation.
Yeah.
And Brian Hansen, man. I love Brian Hansen. Like, he had the grand piano out and we were doing the choir thing. And it just like, my wife and I love the church, fell in love with the church, and we haven't left.
Yeah.
Cool.
Our home church. We've grown with the church.
Yeah.
So that's what got us to Evangel.
Very cool.
Yeah, we kind of have a lot of family that go to this church too.
Yeah,
extended
I was gonna
family
say.
too, for sure. So I won't name drop anybody, but we have a lot of people.
That is the funny thing about North Dakota and about Evangel is people are all like related or connected somehow. And it's
Especially
weird.
now, this church, like just every Sunday I see somebody new that's like a circle in my life that's like now attending Evangel.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I just saw someone on Sunday and we locked eyes and I was like, I know you.
Yeah.
And she's like, high school. And I'm like, and I was like, her name starts with an M. And she's like, Morgan. I'm like, I was going to say Maddie.
There you go.
And they come from Jamestown. Like, it was just like we played basketball together in high school. It was just crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that because I have to be careful what stories now I share on Sundays about my hometown because so many people from my hometown watch online.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So it's just really cool. I one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, I know you serve in a couple different places at Evangel. So I know you help with stuff with NextGen, but also production. And we're actually, I know this podcast will be released later, but I'm talking a little bit about that this weekend in my message. And one of the barriers for a lot of people from serving is that they think, like, Evangel does a lot of stuff really well. And I'm not saying that with any arrogance at all. It's actually more like we have a team who are in the room right now and they're incredible and they make things run really incredibly. And I think sometimes people see the worship team or they see the production team or they think they have to be an all-star parent in order to serve in like eKids or to serve in production. And I what encouragement would you give them? And what have you seen from kind of being behind the scenes, like the difference between just showing up on a Sunday versus coming and participating and being a part of it?
Sure.
And is the bar as high as people think it is, or what's it like?
I'll give you my experience.
Yeah,
so my wife serves in eKids. So she works at the booth most times, the first one. And she started volunteering first. And I was like, I want to roll in the church. I want to do something. So this was pre-COVID, so like probably 2019. Around there. And I was like, I want to do something. The church was really growing, kind of right around that time. We're looking at, doing the addition onto the church. I think it might have started or was going to shortly start.
Yeah.
But there was beginning to be even more so of a need, for people to step up and kind of, step in. And so I was praying about it. Initially, my gut instinct was to do something with kids, right? Because that's kind of my passion. That's where I'm at in life. I was like, I should do something with kids. I said, but I felt like that might not be my best area, So I did reach out and I was kind of starting the process of getting that ball rolling, you know, and I was like, well, maybe I know a lot of husband and wife teams that work, you know, at the booths and checking in. Like, and I was like, maybe I work with Trish, my wife, maybe I can work inside. But so I was slow, but started the process. But I was praying about it. I was like, it's like, what is there? So somebody on production actually reached out to me randomly and said, hey, Noah, I got your name from somebody else. Yeah. That you know, would be a good fit for production. And I was like, I never thought about production. That didn't even cross my mind.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know what it was. I just assumed that it was a bunch of full-time Evangel people that worked at production. Like that was my assumption, right? Like production is just full-time Evangel staff. That's what they do. This is their job. You know, it's techie. I'm not, you know, that kind of guy. But I was like, okay, yeah, I'll give it a shot. So I came one Sunday and I job shadowed, if you will. Yeah. And they said, you know, is this something that would be interesting to you? And I said, I think so. Like, this is out of my world, out of my element. Like, but I feel like this could be a good fit for me. And so I started to come and do some Sundays and do some things. And the first thing I did was, they call it Pro Presenter, which is like you throw the lyrics up on the screen and you kind of change some things. And as simple as that sounds, it's a little nerve-wracking because it is the thing people see on a Sunday service. But I loved it. And that kind of grew, and I started to do some other things within the production area, and it's not a nerve-wracking thing, and production's awesome, and there's a need for production. So if somebody's out there wondering, I saw one of the pastor's sons running camera one Sunday, and so I talked to who was full-time in production at the time. I said, hey, my son's about to be 12. Yeah. Can he run camera too? And like, yeah. You know, I was like, sweet. So the Sundays that I'm serving, I want my son to serve. And so I started to bring him in.
I love that.
And he would run camera and has ran camera until you guys started your middle school service. And so now actually most of my production time is down at the middle school services on Sundays. So I get to be with my son, and I was just there I do probably 2 Sundays a month, you know, doing the middle school thing. But I would just encourage anyone who's, you know, a part of the church, been going to the church, but isn't serving, like, pray about it and then reach out. Yeah. And those that are serving like me, start asking people, you know, because like that's what got me in the door, you know, and production was never on my radar, and it was a blessing because like I've been able to do some, like 2 years ago, I got to work the Unique conference. Yeah. You know, and not this last one, but the one before. And I had got my mother-in-law to come, and I got tickets for my wife. And so I got to kind of see what they were seeing, you know? So we were able to kind of experience and see the same thing. And I don't know, that was an experience and awesome. And I mean, that's cool. So I would encourage anyone to do, to work within the church.
Yeah.
I think like you said, Josh, I think there's kind of 2 veins people fall in. Either, like you said, maybe, oh, I can't live up to that, or I can't do X, Y, Z. And I also think sometimes people think, they're fine. They do fine. Every Sunday, it all just comes together. They must have just ample amount of people. But I think like what you just said, I know you serve extremely regularly. And if not once, twice, however many times a month. And I've said to people, if every person that called Evangel home served, you would maybe be scheduled once every 8-9 weeks. You'd almost be like, what else can I do? How else can I help? And so I think it's so cool to hear from someone who has just taken those steps of obedience to encourage others. Like, hey, you have a part in the body, and to step into it.
Yeah. Thanks for being consistent and for showing up and for serving with your son. That's like it's a really cool example.
Yeah, he loves it.
Like even that middle school service, I look at it and I go, oh my gosh, we couldn't do it without you. You know, like maybe we could string something together, but for what it is, you know, you showing up twice a month is huge. So
middle school service is awesome. Because if you're listening to this podcast and you have a middle schooler, get them to that middle school service.
9 a.m. service?
First service. It's the 9 a.m. So you got to get them up, you know, and you got to come maybe yourselves or just, you know. But the middle school service, Pastor Davion is legit. I love that dude, and we can talk about him later on in this, you know, conversation, but like he's awesome. He's the real deal. And then there are some people that I met through the summer camp, you know, at a different camp, but that are just, and I could talk about that, but they're amazing. Like I was blown away. And they're at that middle school service every morning, loving on your kids. I mean, it's just like,
that's so cool.
Big time.
Yeah.
So get your kids to that middle school service.
Yeah.
I think there were like 51 that were there last Sunday. So it's a decent number.
That's
good.
so cool.
Yeah. 51 middle schoolers getting up and going
That's
to middle school.
huge.
Yeah, it's really cool. So how'd you end up at summer camp?
Summer camp.
You're at summer. You did what, middle school camp?
I did.
Yeah. You surprised yourself.
That one surprised myself. Yes. Well, okay. So my son, we hadn't done camp. So when I grew up, I went to Baptist camp with my best friend at the time in Fargo. And so, and that was kind of like, that was my memory of like camp, and it was a good camp, but it was more camp than it was like a church camp.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that makes sense. And so I never placed a lot of value in sending my kids to camp.
Right.
Just based on my experiences as a younger child. It was like, well, give or take. So my oldest son then, who just turned 13 yesterday, so a little positive and heartbreak.
Wow.
That's a big birthday.
That
He wanted to go to camp. He had a friend who was going to camp, and he's like, I want to go to camp too. And he's like, will you come with me? And I was like, I think so. I don't know. Camp starts in like 2 weeks. I don't even know if you can go. So I emailed or texted, I can't remember. I reached out to Pastor Davion, and I was like, hey, look, my son would like to go to youth camp. Is that an option? Can he go? And if he can go, I'm more than willing to come if there's a need for it.
Yeah.
Is that like my job allows me the ability to do that. So like, if you have a need for camp, let me know, and I'm there. And so there was a need, and I went, and I had a cabin full of middle school boys, and one of them being my son. And it was, that camp was like, I didn't know what to expect going into it. So a little more backstory. We went to family camp where Evangel has their camp.
Yep.
And so we did a big family trip. My family did in June, and we came back and we were at a surprise birthday party for a family friend. And so we're sitting there talking, and I was like, hey, I'm talking to some of the guys there, the dads there. And I was like, I want to do some more camping, like with our sons. We want to like go get tents and let's do this thing. I want to do some more camping. What weekends do you have available? Let's do this. And one of them was like, well, I can't do this weekend because I have family camp. And I was like, that's so cool. You go to a camp with your family, like I wish we did that. And he was like, no, like it's like family camp. Like it's, it's where Evangel sends their, and he kind of looked at me because I've been going to Evangel since, 2008.
It's a very Assemblies of God thing.
It is, apparently. I didn't know.
And I was raised Lutheran, so I had no idea.
So you had no idea.
When I came
either.
in, I was like, what is this world?
I had no idea. The pieces didn't connect until I was actually at family camp. So we're at family camp, and we're there with another male and then another, family, and they're walking around, they're talking like they knew all this place. And I'm like, how do you guys know? Like, it just didn't dawn on me. He's like, well, this is where I went to camp as a kid. And I was like, oh, yeah. So we had our kids,
right?
And this was just for a weekend, and they all had fun. And so that kind of lit the fire for my oldest to want to go to camp.
Cool.
Right. So that's, what got the plug. But then I didn't know what to expect going to this middle school camp. And I knew I had a cabin full of boys that I didn't know. And I was like, I don't really know, So I was nervous, admittedly. Middle school, I taught middle school for a while, and middle school is great, but middle school is challenging, and I was like, especially overnight in a cabin, but I got to tell you, like that was, and I touched on it when I was talking about the middle school services like that. I was so blown away. I was blown away by Pastor Davion, and I was blown away by these two young adult men that were there with the kids. And they're both down at the middle school services on Sundays. And I pulled one aside after like the last day, and I was like, you have like, there's something about you. I mean, I can't, if your kids aren't going to middle school camp, like try and sign them up. The speaker was amazing, right? And he spoke to me as a 40-year-old man, and like the church services at night, like just seeing these two young men in particular that...
Do you want to shout them out?
Trey is one of them.
Yeah.
If you guys know, his name is Trey.
Yeah, he's so
Trayson.
great.
And
Trayson.
then, I wish I knew the other guy's name, and which is why I was kind of hesitant. His brother also serves as a drummer. They're like two guys. He's Trey's size, and he wears glasses. And Gabe is another awesome guy down there, but he didn't come to camp. But Gabe is like amazing.
Right.
But Trey in particular, and then I wish I knew this other guy's name. I apologize, guy.
Ethan?
Is it Ben Ethan?
I thought it was Ethan.
Okay, he's tall like Trey. He's built kind of like Trey.
Okay,
Yeah,
probably
he's
Ethan.
He's at the middle school services all the time, hosting all the time.
Yeah.
Okay,
He's
so
an MLC student too.
that guy, he must be. those two guys, like I was blown away. Like
I just think young guys like that need shouted out like by
They
name.
do.
Like,
They
let's
should
just-
encourage what they're doing.
Man,
Totally.
I came home and I told my wife, like, I was just like, of all things, like, I could not believe their love for God,
Yeah.
like their
right.
heart for Jesus. And then the example that they were setting for the middle school boys that
Right.
were there, like at a cabin full of boys. And like the example that they set, like they were down there, hands raised, praying, worshiping, leading by example, praying over the kids. Like I was just like, I watched in awe. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I texted Davion, I think when we got back, like, cause I wasn't expecting that, you know, cause like my preconceived notion on camp was what I had remembered when I was in 4th grade.
More fun than spiritual.
More
maybe.
fun than spiritual.
Yeah.
And it was just like, man, it hit me. And I got so much out of that camp that I didn't know
Right.
that I needed, I
Wow.
needed, you know?
Wow.
And so like seeing, and just having my son there and
Yeah.
seeing like, okay, like this is what my son's getting. And this is what all these youth
Right.
are getting at this camp. It was just like phenomenal. And that speaker, I wish I could remember his name, but like look it up. But he was, man, he was
So
good.
cool.
He was so good.
Was middle school right before kids camp?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. So you at least got a little break.
Yeah.
And then you were at the kids
my-
camp, which
so
is
then
where
my-
you guys really, really connected.
Yeah, we
more
were both
so.
at kids camp.
Yeah, we were both at
2
kids
weeks
camp.
later. Yep.
Yeah. Which was a whole different experience. That was like way different, night and day.
Which that's like what,
In a good way.
3rd through 5th grade?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
3rd to 5th grade.
It was our son's first time going.
Lots of gaga ball.
So
Yep.
much gaga ball.
And I just said, babe, we're going to be the parents that go. If we can go.
And by we, I mean you're going to camp
Well,
with
and
your
I
son.
said, when the girls go, it's going to be me going.
Yeah.
So, yep.
No, it made sense for me to go. And it was fun. It's such a different experience. It's cool. It was fun for me to be there and to get to hang out with people like you,
Yes.
you know, or like kids from our church that I see all the time, but I don't get to know their name. Every
Like
kid I
you
was
rub
like,
shoulders a lot, but it's like to spend a week together and get
Yeah.
consistent conversation is just.
I was just asking kids like, who's your mom? Who's your
Who are your
dad?
parents?
Yeah, who are your parents? Who are your parents? Trying to put it all together is just really cool. I'm actually really excited for this year because we're doing a little bit of a different model. We're partnering with our network again, but Evangel is going to be doing our camps at the end of July, and they're going to be, each of them will be, I think, a 3-night camp back to back to back for our middle schoolers, high schoolers, and kids. And I'm just hoping like a lot of people from our church, a lot of people from our staff can go and experience that environment together.
I think of even the timing. I know we've talked about like, man, for the timing of it being a little shorter in our 3 camps back to back, like there might be some people who are like, I'm going up when the first camp starts and I'm staying up there till the last camp is done. You know?
Yeah. And I mean, part of the reason is because, well, most of the reason, as I was talking to Pastor Kyle, is just because the camp has so many kids that are coming from all across the state that they're trying to open up more dates, which just creates a really cool
That's so
opportunity for
cool.
kids to go and more kids to go. There's a limited number of beds. And so trying to open up as much space for kids from across our state to go. So it's really exciting.
So exciting.
And I'm excited to hopefully be a part of it in some way, even being down there for a couple of the camps, even if it's for a day, you know, but it's just such a cool environment. And as a parent, to get to sit in that environment with your kid, you know, and not miss those moments is really profound too.
Yeah, it was, I mean, just
Because you have boys at both camps, right?
Yeah. So then, well, Nathan, then my middle child was like, well, I want to go. So I was like, we didn't sign either of you up. So I don't really know, like,
And Dad wasn't planning on going
well,
for 2
I
weeks.
wasn't. So I was like, okay. So then I contacted Pastor Kyle. I was like, look, is there a need for another chaperone? Because if so, Nathan wants to go, and he knows Nathan he was in his yo-yo for Transform.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, he knows Nathan from kids church, but he
Right.
also knows him from kind of the Transform group. So he kind of knows Nathan, and he's like, yeah. So I ended up getting like conjoined rooms. So I had like two rooms.
How many kids?
There were
No, don't tell the nightmare story.
So the cool story. So at middle school camp, there's an older pastor, catch myself. There's an awesome male who, so like you can sign up to do different activities, you know, if you're going to. And so I was so late to the game on both camps that I didn't have an opportunity to like create like an activity to sign up for that kids can participate in. And so at the middle school camp, it was literally just rushed. And so I got there, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know what to pack, what was allowed to pack. Like it was just kind of like all worked out and it was amazing. And but I had a week, you know, for the kids camp. So there's a group meet, and I went out on the group meet and I said, hey, if anybody needs help with their activity, I don't have anyone and I'm more than willing to help. And there's a pastor from Walhalla, I want to say. His name is L, I believe. awesome guy, but he was doing this outdoor cooking.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, he did that for middle school, you know, and he was doing it for the elementary, and he instantly sent me a message back, I'll take your help. I was like, done. What do you need me to bring? Let's do this. Outdoor cooking and little kids. You probably need more than one adult, you know? And so I don't know where I was going with this story. What was your question? I totally lost my train of thought.
You asked like your rooms, like you said you had joint rooms.
Okay, yeah. So that's the full circle here. While we were there, and the first day, I was like, "Listen, Al, you know, I would really appreciate." Because he's like, "Hey, is there anything I can do for you?" I was like, "Yes, actually, thank you for asking me that because I have 2 rooms that are joined by a door, and so I separate them to like 5th graders and then like 3rd because the 3rd grade is kind of young, you know, and some of them kids, it was their first night away from mom and dad, you know, and I was like,
my goodness.
And then after church service, you go back and you can kind of have quiet time and you can talk about, you know, what went on at church, you can pray and you can have some devotion time. And I was like, that's kind of hard with 2 rooms. I don't want all the kids in one room. I just don't feel like I'd be meeting their needs in the best way, right? Like and he came in, he took a room and I had one room, and then middle way through camp, we swapped. But he was such an answer to prayer because
cool.
They loved him. And the older kids, they loved him. Wow. He came and I know he had they would just talk to me. One kid gave his life to the Lord and Pastor Al was able to lead him.
Wow.
I mean, it was just like
so powerful.
Yeah. And I just think back like, man, it was a blessing I got 2 rooms because I wouldn't have had Pastor L there. Yeah. Things just rolled and worked in motion. It was
so cool.
It was awesome. So I think it was 10 kids, which is a lot.
Yeah.
Because Pastor L wasn't there all the time. He was there at night, you know, and then he left.
So if you're wondering, I mean, it's just interesting. Like I think of different cutoffs for camps and stuff, but like you reaching out, it wasn't just, oh, can I get my kids in? You're like, how can I help? Like I'm coming with my kid. I'm going to help. And that's like, if you're wondering as a parent, like, yeah, there's always room to more hands on deck and more
clearly, because I mean, I was the last one for the elementary kids camp and I got 2 rooms.
Exactly.
And I was thinking to myself, like,
what would you have done?
What would they have done?
Yeah.
Had I not, I mean, that's a lot of kids that, you know, and it was, Nathan wants to go. Can I come? Right. I thought for sure he'd be like, no, we're good. I appreciate that. But yeah, Nathan can come type thing. He's like, no, I'll take you. I was like, all right, Pastor Kyle, let's do this. And then I got there. I was like, all right, we're doing this.
Yeah.
This is happening. And it was good though, man. Kids camp was good.
It was so great.
It's a different feel overall than middle school camp, which it should be.
Yeah,
you know, but it was really good.
Totally.
It was really good. Pastor Kyle's, I mean, man, that guy.
Our team, so awesome,
so gifted.
That guy is. He's that guy.
We had an Easter meeting today, and were you there? Yeah. And you missed it. You had to step out. He did a magic trick during his presentation. And he got us all. I mean, Stephen was a foot from him, and Stephen was like, how did you do that? So
he's gifted.
He entertains us too.
Yeah, his heart for kids and the next gen is just incredible.
Oh, it's huge. So,
kids camp is always fun because kids are like sitting at the altar, and 1 minute they're crying, and the next minute you're like, what's going on in your heart? And they're like, I want pizza.
Yeah.
But it's awesome. And I will say this. That like I took pictures of this, like you were praying over my son. I don't think you even know it was my son, but it was one night when we were down there and you laid hands on him, and then like I took a picture, I sent it to my wife, and I was like, you know, this is why we're here, you know, like not just because Pastor Josh is praying over my kid, but like my kid's getting prayed over.
That's right.
You know, and I don't know what the prayer is or how it's affecting him, but like I guarantee it's needed and God's meeting a need. And 3 minutes later, Pastor Kyle like climbs over chairs and goes and lays hands on my kid. And again, I don't think he knew it was my kid. Like Pastor Kyle was doing this and you were doing this, just walking around praying for kids and like.
So cool.
Get your kids to kids camp.
Yeah. One moment in God's presence can change everything.
It is. It's powerful.
It was worth it.
Powerful. Okay. So I feel like thank you for encouraging other people to just be involved and be engaged in dream teams, but also in the lives of their kids' development, you know. It's just like a powerful, inspiring example.
It's awesome. And I will say this, middle school camp, I got like, there's a big long line for lunch, you know, and I got approached by so many kids and then young adults. So like most of the kids there were like Trey's age, like probably 19, 20. And they all asked me, what church do I pastor? You know?
Wow.
No, I mean, because I'm the old guy there. Like, it's not a profound thing. I'm like the old guy in line with a beard.
I think that's powerful that they expect if you're older, you're not really there serving. You have to be pastoring a church.
Yeah, maybe. I guess I'm looking at that.
Where it's like, we actually need more people in their 40s, 50s, 60s to be at middle school camp, to be at.
You do, because it's a young environment, and here I'm the old guy. And then you kind of flip the script, and then at the kids camp, it was a lot of parents.
Yes.
There weren't a lot of parents at the middle school camp, but at the kids camp, I mean, and I made connections with a lot of guys that are in my Bible study group now, like that are there, and like Pastor Josh, like just an informal setting where you can just be Josh, the dad, and I'm Noah, the dad, and we're here at kids camp with our kids, you know, and like, I don't know, just those conversations you have with other parents that you otherwise wouldn't really have that time. Like you're away from everything.
Yeah.
You're at this camp with your kids and with other adults, and you can just like talk real talk.
I feel like, I mean, we didn't even really intend to, but I feel like even this podcast is a little bit of like, how do you make a big church feel small? And I think it's your willingness of how far will you maybe get out of your comfort zone, maybe get into settings where, like you said, you were nervous. But you gave your yes. And I think Josh is going to reference it this weekend, but Dave and Julie Durung have become dear friends. We've gotten to know them, but they've only been at the church for about 3 years now. But when they came into it, they had friends here. And they were like, I don't know if we'll like Evangel, it's just really big. And their friends said, the more you get involved, the smaller the church feels. And they were like, we didn't believe it, but now it feels like a small family to us. And it's so true. The more we've gotten involved, the more we've gave God our yes, it just feels smaller. Like we know, it's like, oh, I know you, or I got to do this with you. So I feel like you talking and explaining that is also a great example of that as well. So
do it. Block summer off, go to camp.
Go to camp. No, the other person that I'm going to highlight this week, like all of our services, cameras, you know, everything happening on stage, screens. There's a front of house lead who's kind of helping direct a lot of that during the weekend services, and they're even coming backstage and giving feedback on some stuff. And that person this weekend is a volunteer who's a physical therapist.
Yeah,
you know, but she's dynamic in that position, and she gives the team, even our staff team, great feedback. Or she'll look at my message notes and she'll be like, hey, you said this, and I think you meant to say that.
She's very like,
she's
I think she was your assistant for Unique, a few times.
Yeah, because her and I go back to the PT physical therapy days.
Because that's your world.
Yeah, so we connected at the hospital well before we connected at church.
But I think a lot of people would look and say, oh, that's a staff member. And it's like, no, she's a physical therapist who shows up on Sundays and just, leads.
Just natural leader.
Yeah.
Most of the people there are not production backgrounds. And a lot of them,
it's like a different muscle for you guys that you get to use.
But it's fun though, because it's something that's out of my comfort zone. I feel a little more comfortable with it. But a lot of the production staff is really young.
Yeah.
Kids that are volunteering, that are in middle school and high school.
They're into the cameras. They're into
100%.
the media.
Yeah.
And they know what they're doing. And they're, it's awesome.
It's inspiring.
And maybe,
So if you see someone at church service, they're not full-time. I had the misconception 5 years ago,
Yeah, we'd have to have such a big staff to do that, which would probably be not great stewardship either. But for some people too, it's like, hey, maybe you aren't the biggest. I'm not saying everyone on production is this way, but like maybe the thought of standing at a door and greeting hundreds of people makes you want to die a little bit. There's a really fun production booth, where it's like
you're in the back room.
You're tucked back there, you're a little hidden, and you got your little posse of production people.
You do. You get to know your crew.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think people fully connect.
Yeah, a big church gets smaller.
It does.
It gets smaller.
Yeah, you have
I'm
your crew.
on my Transform group because of somebody in production who invited me into their Transform group. Like
it's just this little weave that the Lord just weaves it all through. I love it.
Yeah. So there's Heart and Soul happening in March, happening in July. And if you want to get involved on a dream team and get to know people and figure out your fit, that's how to start. So I do want to talk for a couple minutes. We weren't going to go this far down the path. I love this conversation so far.
So good.
And it's going to help a lot of people.
So good.
But I know you do also like meaningful work.
Yeah.
Not just here at the church, but in your day job.
Yes.
And so can you talk a little bit about who you serve?
Yes.
And how meaningful it is?
Absolutely. So I am a teacher. I got into teaching later in life when I was 30. So there's a whole story behind that.
Wow.
But I had a whole different background, kind of job-related experiences and that sort of thing. And then at 30, like just things weren't right. And I was like,
How did you know it wasn't right?
I felt unnerving, felt unease. And I I spent some time in I was in the military for a while, and I got deployed. And so I got deployed in 2005 to Iraq with a group of 100 guys. And prior to my deployment, I wanted to be a lawyer. That was kind of my thing. So I signed up for college, and talking to the counselors, my path was criminal justice was my major, English was my minor, and then you go into law school. So I did that. I did criminal justice as my major, English as my minor. And the deployment kind of changed some things within me, right? And so I got back, and I wasn't so certain that that's kind of the career path that I wanted.
Right.
I was like, but I'm kind of beholden to this degree. I'm a year away from getting it now. And so maybe a cop, like, 'cause what else are you gonna do with a criminal justice degree? So maybe a cop. And I didn't feel good about that. And I was like, man, that's not me. Like, to be a cop, you can have a very kind heart. And I know you had someone on your podcast a year or two ago who I think was a cop in Fargo. And you can do that route, but you also have to give people tickets, and like, I'm kind of a non-confrontational guy. And I feel like, like that was hard for me to like process. And so my wife and I moved to, she wasn't my wife, she was my fiance at the time, moved to Bismarck, and we got an apartment. She moved into it first, and I lived with my parents until we were married. And it was during that time. So we moved here over the summer. Well, there's more to the story, I guess, than that. I wanted to be I transitioned into wanting to be a pilot, Black Hawk pilot.
Yeah.
So I put some time and effort into that. I got a flight packet together. I went to officer candidate school, and I was at officer candidate school, and I was so gung ho for this. Like, I put a lot of time and effort into it, and I thought this is exactly what I want to do. Like, I want to be I didn't want to be a cop anymore. I didn't want to go to law school. I want to be a Black Hawk pilot. Like, this is my calling in life. I'm going to do this. And I was so certain in it. And then I got to officer school, and I'm down there at officer school, and 3 days in, like, I had like almost a panic attack, if you will. It like hit me, and I had a hard time sleeping. I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing, and why am I here?
Right.
And so, but I was there, I was there. Like, what are you going to do now? No, figure that one out. And I was getting married in September, and I knew I had my flight packet was done. I just needed to complete this officer training, and then, whenever that opening opens for the National Guard, I had my opportunity to go. And I just I couldn't do it. So I got back, and I didn't go through with the flight school. And I was like, but now what? I'm graduated. I'm getting married in a month. But now what? And I kind of was lost. Like, it's like when you graduate from college, for me anyways, there was like a void. Like, I didn't know what to do with I'm an adult now. You almost feel like I don't know what to do with my life. Now what, And so everything I thought I was going to do just kind of stopped. And so I applied for the sheriff's department, and I applied for a railroad company.
Yeah.
And I got hired for both. Because I applied at the same time, I interviewed at the same time, and the sheriff's department wanted me for a school resource officer. And this would be a good fit for you. And I was like, never thought about that. I can do that, Well, what would I do when school's not happening? Well, you're going to be a sheriff. And I was like, I don't know about that. I feel like I could do the school resource thing.
You're going to go to kids camp.
And I was like, so the other one though was straight days and that sort of thing, not a shift for thing. So I went with that one. I was like, more family friendly. I did that for 3 years, and I got hit with it was kind of the same anxiety. Like, I had anxiety. Like, and I talked to and I didn't know what it was, but it was like, this is not for you. This is not what you should be doing.
Right.
And so I was like, I'm gonna go back to school again. I'm gonna do something different. And my wife was on board. Sure, if that's what you want to do, let's do it. And so I kept my job, and I went back to school for process plant technology. I'm gonna go work at a power plant. I had a buddy who was doing it. I was like, who was working there, and he's like, yeah, I think you would like the job. And I was like, I think I would like it too. So I went and I did the school. And again, to put a bow around this, I was kind of doing my own thing, is what it was. I was just trying to find my own thing, and I was doing it my way. And I did go to school. I completed it, and I got a job out in Beulah at one of the plants. And I was there, and things were great, just like it was, at my previous job for a little while. And I literally the same thing. Like, I couldn't sleep at night. I was at work, and I just did not feel like I feel like I was missing something. Like, this is not right. This is not for me. I shouldn't be here. I don't know why am I feeling this way again? And I told my wife again, and she's like, we got to figure this out. We have kids, we have a house. You got to kind of figure this life out, And I was like, you're right. I do. But I don't know. And I don't feel like this is it. I don't feel good. This is not me. And so a position opened up at Basin Electric, which owned the company I worked for in Beulah. So I was able to transfer to Basin. So I wasn't having to drive every day out to the plant. And the plant was a lot of nights and weekends and holidays and all of that thing, which being in Bismarck was nice. It was nice, but it was also a shift work thing. And so again, did that for a year or two, and again, it was like, it just hit me. And it was like a 3-year period. And I was like, I cannot do this. Like, this is not for me. And my wife was like, well, what is it you want to do? I said, I just don't know. And I started to pray about it. I was like, God, what do you want? I'm 28 now, like, I need direction. Like, I can't be doing this, so like, I need something.
I feel like I talked about this a little bit in church one weekend about when you are trying to like make a way for yourself and you just keep hitting your head into the wall. And then finally you come to a place of like, okay, Lord.
Right.
What do you want from me? Right. And it's like, you kind of reach that point. It seems like
I did. And I'm, it shouldn't have taken till I was 28 and like a bunch of careers, but like it did. But I have, real responsibilities. I can't just like, I'm going to go back to school to be a teacher. Life doesn't work that way when you're at the stage I was in. But I reached out to Dickinson and they said, yeah, you can, or no, I reached out to Dickinson and I want to go back to be a teacher. That's what I told my wife, is I want to be a teacher. She's like, well, okay, figure it out. How are you going to do that? And what are our next steps? I said, well, I'm going to figure it out. So I went and talked to Dickinson and they said, no. I was like, I can't show up to every class. I can't promise I'll be at every class. I work shift work. I'm at forced overtime if somebody's not there. Like, I can give you my schedule. And if I get called in for work, I can't be there and it's going to be a short notice thing. And originally they said, no, like that just doesn't work on our format. And I said, okay, well, now I know. I tried, now I know. And I didn't feel good. I went back. I didn't go back. I was continuing to work and I worked another year and I was like, I feel like this still isn't right. And there was a change in leadership at Dickinson State with like the liaison at the Bismarck campus. I was like, I'm gonna go try the new leadership. So I went in there and I talked to the different guy and I said, here's what I got. Here's my schedule. This is what, I'm thinking. And he said, absolutely. Do it. And I was like, oh my goodness, thank you. He's like, what are you thinking? I said, middle school. I want to be a social studies teacher in high school or middle school. He said, no. And I was like, what do you mean no? I said, I love history. That's my thing. Like, I want to teach, like, I love all history, everything. I want to teach it. He's like, no, it's not. He's like, how many middle school teachers are there at Bismarck High School? I said, I don't know. He said, probably 2, maybe 3. He said, you need to go the route of elementary. And I said, really? That's like, think so? He's like, absolutely. You need to go the route of elementary. I said, I never thought about that. Then I started to think about that. And I was like, you know what? I felt good about it. Yeah. Prayed about it. And I was like, I feel good about it. I'm going to do this. So I did it. And I worked still full-time at Basin Electric. I did full-time education, teaching, whatever. I was able to do my student teaching while still working full-time. And that was a whole nother experience. I switched with a guy. He worked all my day shifts and I worked all his night shifts. So I would student teach from like 8 to 4. And then I would go work from 4 to 4 in the morning.
Wow. Oh my
Come home and sleep for a few hours and then go and do it again. And we had a kid and my wife was amazing and she helped me manage that, and because I couldn't quit my job. There's uncertainty, you can't quit your job.
Yeah.
I had health insurance. We had just had our second child, like things were. So, but it got opened the door. I got hired before I was even done student teaching. And so I worked all the way up until the day I was contracted to start with my new position at the school system. And then I started that. And so that's kind of a short end story. Up to 30 is when I started. 30, I'm 40 now. So I've been doing this for 10 years, been teaching for 10 years. And I started at elementary. And then it progressed. I did a grad program. And within that grad program, so I kind of got a little restless. I was doing kind of the same grade level. And you guys can ask any questions you want. I just feel like I'm talking a lot, but I did a grad program. And during that grad program, there's a project I had to do, which brings me to current, right? So full circle. And I didn't know what I wanted to do for this grad program. And the guy I was partnered up with said, we should do this for students who are learning English as their second language, right? And our community, our district has a lot of students who are learning English as their second language, and they are students of ours. And so we should showcase or put a spotlight on this community and the program that serves them.
Yeah.
And I was like, sure, let's do that. Let's do that, And so we did. We put together this brochure, we made this YouTube video, and we did this thing, and I got to know this program way more than I didn't really know anything about it or that it existed. And it intrigued me. I was like, this might be, something in the future. And so my grad program is for leadership, and that's kind of where I envisioned myself to go. But fast forward, God kind of opened a door. I didn't really seek out my current position. Someone contacted me and said, hey, is this something you'd be interested in? And I was like, yeah. And it was through that grad program, like talking to people, somebody involved in the, who I had interviewed and, so they reached out and I said, yeah, let's, I think so. I think so. And so I did it. And I've been doing it now. It's my 5th year. And so what
specific role, serving students who are learning English as their second language.
Correct. Wow. Yeah. Or even in some cases, their third.
Right. I was going to say it could be more.
Yeah. Third or fourth. Like these kids are amazing. And so my current role is, a teacher within the district that serves students who are learning English as their second language. So it's a phenomenal job.
Right. Yeah. And I think we were just talking about, before the podcast, just kind of dialoguing about things, but how we've just learned that if you are raised in the Midwest, both of us have been born and raised in North Dakota, and that we have to be so intentional to expand our worldview, even when it comes to, does everyone speak only English, right? Like that we've just realized is a telltale sign for us, of like how expansive is our world, is our like connections really. And so I think I didn't know about this program until probably the past couple of years, because I connected with someone named Kara who goes to our church.
Yes,
and have gotten to know. Yeah, yes. Have gotten to know her, and I know she's big in leadership. Yep, in that too. And so I feel like my eyes just were open too, and we've spoken on this in a different podcast too. I think with Jasmine with Bismarck Global Neighbors, but just for us having our au pair that lived with us, where she came to learn English. Just the things that you don't think of for people that are either confusing or frustrating. And English is stinking hard to learn. And it's like, even the kids would laugh. What were some words she would say? And I'd say, don't you laugh. And I'd say, hey, Andrea, give them a word in Spanish to say, And they'd try to say it. I'm like, I don't think you'd want her to laugh at you if you were trying to say that word, right? So growing in empathy for those, we just thought it was so good for our family and our kids. We're like, if you're in a world where you only talk to people who speak your language, like where does your empathy have to grow? Where does your patience have to grow? So I just think what a beautiful position to be in and to work in.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. And so the district that I work for, then there's north of 600 kids that are in the program.
Yeah.
Wow. Right. And you get in the program through a variety of ways. Well, one way you get screened into the program, but it's,
I was reading about it on the website actually before this, because it's like, you guys have great information. Of just like, why, how would my kid graduate out of this program or, things like that. I was like, this is so informational.
There's a lot to it. And, and there's 600. So I work specifically with about 41.
Okay.
Right. So I work with 41. But I think a misconception maybe is that the majority language that I would work with is Spanish. And it's not.
Ooh,
it's not.
What different languages, if you're 20. Allowed to say?
Yeah, so there's 20. There's 20 different languages or more. No.
Between
20
your
different
40
countries.
students?
20 different countries.
20 different countries.
So my students particularly, and there's probably like 70 languages if I'd be.
Right.
I mean, there's a wide range, you can umbrella them into like major categories within our district. Yeah. It's so like 30% would be kind of that Spanish. 30% is a language called Chuukese, which they're from the Marshall Islands, Guam area. The fantastic people.
Wow.
So big 30%.
Say that again. Chuki?
Chukies. That's how they say it. Yeah, they call themselves chooks. Chookies.
No way.
They're chook, yeah. All they're cute kids. So cute. And adults. So somebody who they've now recently moved to Florida, but they used to work at the church. So like he is Chukis. So like it kind of give you, it's a Marshallese, you know, so it's a kind of Hawaiian type thing. But when you're from Guam, the big island, they speak English at Guam. But then there's all these islands, like 40 of them. And each island is kind of its own dialect, and it's not English. It's not English related at all. And so it makes things a little challenging with that language because there's no translation app. You know, like I can have an app, I can translate anything into anything. Yeah. But Chukis, I cannot. Wow. You know, and so that...
Because it's very specific to their island.
Correct.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's just like not a lot. And so, you know, we really rely on interpreters. Right. To kind of like help out for parent. Like if you just think a daily function, your kid going to school, like there's just a lot that goes on with like, you have a class party on Friday, you know, and your kid can bring a treat. Like that communication goes home to parents, but if you don't speak the language, you don't know. Right. Or no school. Just the no school thing on like it's President's Day, they don't know. Yeah. Right. Because they don't get that communication in a language that they can understand. And so
even I think when we don't have school, it's very tied to like American history and holidays and things like that, if that's not your culture.
Or just bus routes. Or I mean, there's so much that goes into it. But yeah, so 30% would be kind of that Spanish dialect from a variety. 30% would be like Chukis, you know. Now I'm lumping this in. There's a lot more, you know, and then like probably, what did I say? It's like 20% would be Ukrainian and 20% would be like Filipino, you know. But within that is a lot more.
Right, right.
Yeah. So, and there's a lot of different languages that are out there.
Well, one of the, things that makes me so happy is when I'm standing in the lobby at the end of the 12:30 service and the immediate rush of people when that service is dismissed is such diversity. Yeah. And it always reminds me, like I've been raised in North Dakota my whole life and people always say North Dakota is like 98% Caucasian, you know, but there is diversity in our state. Yes. And I love that so many people have found Evangel as a home in the midst of that. Even if they come from a different background, they felt like they can relate. I've run into people who have said, hey, who only speak Spanish or only speak Ukrainian, you know, and they're trying to hear the services or they're, I'll hear people whispering while I'm preaching and they're translating, you know, and it's not always like, it's so easy to just serve the people that are the easiest to serve. Yeah. You know, because they speak your language, they understand the context. Like a farm kid from North Dakota who's lived in North Dakota their whole life is easy for me to preach to, you know, but I just think of Jesus going out of his way to people in all different walks of life. And being intentional, you know.
I remember when it was like Andrea was her name who lived with us and her first couple of weeks, you know, and she'd come to church, you know, with us and things, and she's a believer. And after the first couple of services, I was like, were you able to like understand what Josh was saying? And she's like, God, church, you know, and I was like, okay, great, Jesus, you know, and I was like, okay. And by the end, you know, she totally could. But it's funny because Kara, who you referenced, she sought out Andrea without knowing she was connected to us and said, hey, you know, like you can tell there's people who I would say have a missional heart where their eyes are looking back and forth, even at church, like who maybe would need someone to come and say, hey, she showed her this app of like, hey, if you want it, it translates in real time.
Real time, yeah. It's an amazing thing.
And like makes like a, manuscript almost, or is that the word? Yeah. Where you'd like type it up. And I just thought, this actually is a church. We probably should know a bit more about this to where we could provide resources. It's definitely an area that we want to grow in.
Well, one of the reasons that I started preaching with the TV was because somebody said, oh yeah, Josh, we couldn't interpret your services because you talk too fast and because of your cadence. I was like, oh gosh, well, I know there's people sitting in the audience trying to interpret all this. So part of preaching with the TV is it changes my cadence.
Slows them down.
And it slows me down, you know?
That's interesting.
And just to leave space in case, you know?
It's not just how fast he reads, it's how fast he can, you know,
yeah, it's very easy as a communicator to always be I preach at a level 3 volume and I preach at this cadence and you have to insert things to change that cadence. And so that was even some of the logic behind changing it, you know, to try to be more
it's an amazing thing. Like they are coming. Like this church has, and every Sunday, like I'll reference this. I was working production one day and production door was open. And all of a sudden I got bombarded by 2 kids that just came in hugging me. And I was like, looked down. I was like, what? I said their names. I was like, what are you guys doing? Like, and I know their parents, and their parents, they actually got me this hoodie.
Oh, I love that.
They went back home, and then that's why I'm wearing it today. Because I knew I was going to do the podcast, and I was like, oh my God, I want to wear the hoodie.
Yes.
Maybe they'll see it. But, and so they are Ukrainian. But they came and they gave me this hug, and I was like, you guys go to church. And I know the parents don't, at the time, for sure, because it was about 2 years ago, did not speak any English.
That was going to be my question. How much do these kids get put usually in a spot where they are the translator for their family?
Often, but these kids spoke very little as well, because I had just, it was probably a year into working with them. And so they came and they gave me this hug, and I was like, oh my goodness. So I can text the parents because they can communicate, they can translate, text messages. And so I would translate Josh's messages when I was working production into Ukrainian, and I would meet her in the lobby and like, here are the notes, because I would get the notes if I was back house lead or something like that. Or actually, if I was doing programs, I could get the notes. So I would just translate those.
Oh my gosh.
Ukrainian, and I would give it to them. And then mom reached out and she's like, what more can my kids do at this church? I was like, well, we can get them in a connect group. Let's get them to transform. And so got them in signed them up for transform groups.
Wow.
And then they got their cousins who are over in Mandan. So they're all going here. They're at the connect groups to transform. But that's one small story. I have seen so many of the kids that either I work with directly or indirectly that are walking these halls on Sundays that are coming out of E-Kids. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, like you go.
Yeah.
So like, they are in our churches. They are doing their best to follow along and listen, and they love this church. And it's just like, it's awesome that you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure they're going home or even on YouTube and they're watching it and translating it. So,
wow.
Bro, your heart is so good.
Yes.
Like just your willingness. I cut at the very beginning of this conversation where like, so I got to serve, I got to be involved in this area, I got to go to camp, I got to like, or I got to print these notes out for this Ukrainian family. Like, it's just such a great heart. So thank you. I mean, thank you for that attitude and that spirit, and for just wanting to serve people, however you could, and not just for your own kids. Like, I know you're doing it for other kids and for these families. It's incredible.
Yeah, well, the families are awesome. This church is awesome. It's not. I mean, anyone in production is more than willing to jump up, and all areas.
Right.
All areas. There's so many people.
I think your story represents so many people's story in our church too, and I think your story and your heart. I think of the phrase like, "Oh, the church is alive and well." Like the Spirit of God is moving in the hearts of His people. Because really, it's your love for Jesus that propels you to. Yeah. Why would you care, right? Why would you? Go the extra mile. And I just think what a powerful witness that is.
Yeah.
Whether you get to witness outwardly and say the name of Jesus, or you're doing your job and just faithfully serving and loving people, is powerful. Yeah.
I hope it's an encouragement to other people who are listening to just take notice of the people around them, and take notice of the opportunities.
And I think what you persevered to and through to find really what you're operating probably in your calling, right? Like what God designed you to do, and had to get through a couple things to find it, which I think that ministers to so many people who walk through the exact same.
Yeah, like don't give up. Like I was listening to your most recent podcast, and like he did MLC. I forget his name.
Travis?
He had a big beard.
Yeah, Travis. Travis, man's man. That guy. Right there.
Well, I mean, I just kind of was like, don't be discouraged if you're 30 and you feel like, this is all that I got. This is the job that I'm in. That might be your calling. God might have you in this place and to reach people that otherwise wouldn't get reached. I just think of like my current position now, like I'm able to reach families and see families and encourage families in a way that maybe I'm the only one that has that opportunity to hug that kid or, to speak life over them, Right. And so don't get discouraged if you're in a position or a job that you don't like.
Yeah.
Pray. God might open doors. Just gotta walk through them. Like what's his name, Travis?
Travis, yeah.
Yeah, he quit his job and went to MLC. I mean,
incredible.
He answered God's calling, and now look. So don't be discouraged.
Now he's super fruitful in what he's doing for God.
Yeah, so cool.
And go to kids camp.
Yeah.
And go to kids camp. More info coming soon.
Yes.
Yeah.
You'll love it.
Awesome. Thanks for the conversation. Thanks for coming in. You came in totally blind today. We didn't even give you anything to prep, and this was awesome.
I feel like I didn't speak enough about my position, but
Hey, it's great.
No, I think is what the conversation was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And really great.
It'll be a huge encouragement to people.
It will.
So
yeah.
take us out.
Well, we kind of said all the things at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right? So
love you. Bye.
Yeah. If you think you're going to be encouraged by this, share it with them.
Yeah.
And until next episode, we'll see you then.